All right, my clock rolled over, so I'm going to get this thing started. So this is the Pochven Salvage Guide. I did date this with a year. Do not blame me or come after me if things change, right? Pochven has seen a lot of changes recently, so a lot of other guides may be out of date. Basically, following this should serve as a basis to basically get comfortable. It's a very good way to get comfortable in dangerous areas of space, really shake off those negative 1.0 jitters, and, you know, make some good money doing it. So basically, who am I? Just general information. My name is Davy Ingram. I'm an officer within Kybernauts Clade. Kybernauts Clade has been around since the initial days of the invasion. We started out as an alt corp, but basically what you need to know for this is that we are full-time Pochven residents. That includes myself. I go weeks at a time without leaving the region. And I am a salvage hunting enjoyer, and I actually started off salvaging as kind of an alpha account Newbro. That's one of the major activities you can do just starting out in the region. And basically, I've seen both sides of the coin there, so I really do know what works and what doesn't work for, you know, salvaging and hunting salvagers, right? So that said, I'm going to be a little biased here. I am hoping for some new targets. I like seeing new activity in the region. We will go over a threat analysis of what people may be flying when they're trying to kill you when you're salvaging. That said, that gives us the other side of the coin. So if you do want to go out and hunt salvagers, it's a very good way to get into PvP. A lot of the fight is not necessarily in the shooting the guns part, but in the cat and mouse game. So my main goals here are I want people to try out Pochven. I think if the region gets more popular, CCP will give it some more attention, and I'll be happy. And this is, generally speaking, an introduction. So salvaging in Pochven is about 70 mil to 100 mils per hour in general. It is a day one activity. You can do this at 0 SP. And it's very low risk, not in the sense that you're not going to die, but in the sense that you won't really care if you die. You can do this in very low value ships and make a lot of money doing it. It's not like high-sec mining where you might be making 30 mil an hour, but you're fielding a 70 mil ISK per hour barge, right? You're in a 10 mil frigate making 100 mil an hour at the max. And I think Pochven salvaging will really teach you some very important EVE mechanics if you go out and do it. It'll really make you use D-scan. It'll teach you evasion and hunting mechanics, and that's a very important PvP aspect a lot of folks don't consider, and it really does get you over those shakes of going into a dangerous area for the first time. So, class overview, what are we going to actually talk about? So first and foremost, we're going to have to talk about what exactly is Pochven. The region itself is a bit hidden away. So we'll go over a brief history that'll help explain some things on how stuff works. We'll go over standings and why it's important in Pochven, and how to fix it. We'll go over the regional layout in general, and we'll talk about the regional effects. We'll then talk about getting into and out of Pochven, the basically entry and exit methods, and those will be wormholes and filaments. And then we'll actually get into the meat and potatoes, that is, you know, the space garbage itself. Basically, where to find your salvage, basic fits and strategies you can use for your ships, and how enemy players are going to try to kill you, and basically what you need to worry about. And again, that leads you into the, if I want to go salvage the salvagers, how do I do that? And then, of course, we're going to talk about liquidation and some things you may not consider when you're out salvaging in terms of loot. And then, of course, we're going to end with a quick recap of a step-by-step kind of recipe of just give me the details, I just want to go do it. So that said, I like discussions more than lectures. Feel free to ask questions at any time. And this is a very high level kind of, there's going to be lots of abstraction here. So if you're confused at any point, please let me know. If you want me to go into more detail on anything, please let me know. So, Pochven, what is the region exactly? So it's dark and red. It is, you may have to mess with your graphic settings when going here. So the Pochven systems that I live in have good Caldari high-sec connections, and basically I get flashbanged every time I leave to high-sec. You may jump into Pochven, you may not be able to see your ship. Feel free to play with your post-processing settings and shader settings. Basically, Pochven consists of Stolen Empire systems. Players basically went out and did a bunch of event sites, kind of like you're seeing now with the Drifter Crisis sites, of basically flipping Empire systems from high-sec and low-sec into negative 1.0 Pochven region systems. There are 4 factions present. There are Rogue Drones, Edencom, Triglavians, and Drifters. Triglavians being the region owners that own all the stations out here. They are the most prevalent in the region. Basically, what you need to know about Pochven is that everything is hostile and wants to kill you. This is enemy players. This is basically every NPC. This is a very dangerous piece of space. However, you can mitigate a lot of those risks if you know what you're doing. Major points of the hostility is don't go to the sun. The NPCs like to hang out at the sun. It's a very common thing to see newer players to the region warp to the sun grid to try to go get safe, just to be killed by the NPCs that like to hang out there. Other things you need to consider when being out in Pochven is that the NPCs will pod you. So don't fly with expensive implants. D-Scan is your friend. We're not going to cover D-Scan in this lecture itself, but the wiki does have a good D-Scan guide that should get you up to speed. So, standings, or not getting shot by NPCs in Pochven. Basically, fixing your standings and modifying your standings is not required. However, it is one of those things that makes your life easier. So, basically going over that faction list, the Rogue Drones and Drifters always want to kill you no matter what. There's nothing you can do to prevent this. By default, Edencom will want to be your friend. By default, Triglavians don't like you and will shoot you. That said, you can modify your standings such that Triglavians don't want to shoot you or Edencom don't want to shoot you. Basically, to view your standings, you can click your character profile picture in the top left corner. You then go to the Interactions tab, then the Standings tab, and then you scroll around for whatever faction you're looking for. Of particular note, if you do not have any standings with a faction, they will not appear in the list. So if you're scrolling around in your looking for Triglavians or Edencom, they will not appear here. That just means you're at the default setting. So to fix your standings, okay, make Triglavians and Edencom like you. Basically what you need to do is go into Pochven and kill a Rogue Drone or Drifter/Sleeper. This is a very brief guide for initial standings tick. This is a very in-depth topic long term. There are various methods you can do to increase your standings to a high level such that you can do things in Pochven like use jump clones and whatnot. We're not going to cover that in this class. We're just going to go over the I want Triglavians to like me part. So the general strategy is to buy any cheap frigate or even a corvette, that anything you don't mind losing, just assume it's going to die. Doesn't have to be fit particularly well. As long as you have guns, you'll be fine. And basically you're going to get into Pochven, and we'll cover the getting into Pochven in a second slide here coming up. But basically you go into Pochven, you find a Rogue Drone. Rogue Drone because that is the easiest NPC to kill. You kill that Rogue Drone or Rogue Drones before it ends up killing you. And at that point, you're essentially done. The Edencom and Triglavians both hate Rogue Drones in Pochven, and therefore killing one makes them both slightly like you a little bit more, which is just enough to get off that default 0.0 with both of them to be positive with both of them. Of particular note here, standings ticks from NPCs take about 10 minutes to register. It's just kind of how the game mechanically functions. So you'll kill the Rogue Drone, and it may take some time for that NPC tick, for the NPCs to actually like you. And you may need to log out or have a session change timer of some kind for that standings change to register. So you may kill the Rogue Drone itself, get the notification in the top left corner that the Triglavians like you now, but then they might still chill you. That can be fixed by, logging out. There is an in-depth Wikipedia guide for NPC standings. The link is in the slide there. Pochven layout, if you go into the in-game map and look at the region and do a search for it, it will appear as a complete and utter jumbled mess. The better way to look at the regional layout is to go to the Pochven entry manual. It is this link here. You can Google it. It'll come up. You can scroll through that website. Pochven, you can hear it referred to as the triangle. This is the reason why the systems are basically laid out in a triangle. The most easiest way to read them. Of particular note, Pochven is completely nullsec, negative 1.0. That means you can use bubbles. There's no help from station guns or gate guns. Again, very hostile region. There is regional space weather. The ones that we particularly care about for salvaging is that negative 30% penalty to warp speed. Essentially what that means is everything happens a little bit slower within the region. The other effects really affect fleet composition and small gang PvP. For this class, we don't really care about those. The 30% penalty to warp speed means you do move around slower, going from system to system, but more importantly, it allows some different counterplay to survive people trying to kill you. Of particular note, within the region layout itself, Archie, Kino, and Diarja, the corners of the triangle, the ones at the top, left and right, are all home systems, and the gates require standings to enter. That is entry only. If you find yourself in Kino, or Archie, or Diarja, you can leave no problem. That's not the issue. What is the issue if you're in, for example, Otella in that bottom right corner, and you try to go to Kino, you will be denied entry if you do not have at least 6.0 standings with the Triglavians. What that means is, if you're trying to run away from a PvP encounter, let's say you go from Igni to Otella and you try to run, and so you see the Kino gate and you warp to it. I have killed many salvagers and players who have warped to the Kino gate, been unable to take the gate, panic, mash a bunch of buttons on their keyboard, and I then catch them and kill them. It is one of the main causes of new player deaths in Pochven, in my opinion. For the sake of salvaging, the best route is that you can basically ignore these systems, pretend they don't exist. There's not a lot of things going on in these home systems that you can't do otherwise using the other systems. Other particular notes is that the border systems, the ones in the middle, so Senda, Attila, Oronichi, Otonumi, Arvasara, Sakenta, between the home systems, those are long warp systems. The system size of those is big enough that you'll need to bounce between celestial objects to descan gates safely. So for example, if you're in Como or Igni or Otella, pretty much any other Pochven system, the system-to-system gates will be within descan range, so the travel speed is a lot faster. But if you're in Sakenta or Arvasara, the distance from the gates will be outside of descan range, so you'll want to bounce off a player-owned customs office or planet instead of just warping straight to gate. You're not going to be able to check for gate camps with bubbles as easy. Okay, so entry and exit into Pochven. This is a very in-depth topic, but we're going to go over the basically minimum requirements of what you need to know. Filaments. This is one method of entry and exit. The entry filaments you care about are the cry filaments. Basically, you care about those filaments because they're most reliable. If you look back at the region map of Pochven, you'll see that basically each corner of the triangle is broken up into a different constellation. So for example, Svarog is the bottom left here, Perun is the bottom right, and Veles is the top. If you take a Cry-Veles filament, you'll end up in one of these green border systems. They're all very close to each other. It allows you basically to set an area of the triangle that you care about and makes your life more logistically easier because you know you're storing all your loot in certain stations and you're not spread out completely. The other filaments are border filaments. They will take you to the border systems, the ones in the middle, and the home filaments that will take you to one of the corners. You can use those for entry and exit for entry. However, they will split you up completely into the different kind of sectors of Pochven, and so your loot as you go out and salvage may be very spread out. It can potentially create a logistical nightmare. Exit filaments, or how you get out of Pochven, again, for the sake of simplicity, use proximity extraction filaments. Again, these are the most predictable on where you're going to end up. The way these work is that they look at the Pochven system you're currently in and will drop you off in a known space that's either high-sec or low-sec system, roughly where that system used to belong, that Pochven system used to belong to when it was not Pochven. So if you go to the Pochven entry manual website and you look at Harva, you'll see a nice chart that looks like this. So if you're in Harva and you use a proximity extraction filament, you'll be guaranteed to land in one of these high-sec systems. That said, you can use extraction filaments in different systems to guarantee landings in different locations. So for example, Otella and Kino are very close to Jita. So if you have loot in Igni, it's a Galente system. You're probably going to end up, if you use an extraction filament there, near Dodixie. However, if you go one jump within Pochven to Otella, you're guaranteed to land somewhere near Jita. It makes logistics a lot easier if you're willing to do that one jump across. Some words of caution on filaments. You need to be in a fleet to use a filament. That can be in a fleet of just yourself. I have made the mistake of undocking and trying to use a filament without being in a fleet. It's really not a big deal. It's just that extra like 10 to 30 seconds of whoops, make a fleet real quick, right? And the other caution warning that I cannot really speak on to, because this change happened about 2 or 3 days ago, is that all filaments now have a spool time before actually moving you. You activate the filament, you have to wait out a timer, and then you jump. For entry filaments, you're probably going to be using those for high-sec, so it doesn't really matter too much. However, for exit filaments, that matters a whole lot, because you are going to be stuck in Pochven, very dangerous area, trying to exit, and you have to wait out the timer. There will be lots of times where you will probably be getting combat probed, and you may not be able, you'll have to warp off before you can actually extract. There is, again, EVE Wiki articles on filaments and whatnot that are more in depth than this. The gist of it is, entry filaments, use a Cry, Perun, Veles, or Svarog filaments. Exit filaments, use a proximity extraction filament. That brings us to the other entry and exit method, that is the wormholes. Again, we're going to reference the Pochven entry manual. The same charts will tell you where the wormholes are, essentially. And we'll reference EVE Metro. EVE Metro is a third-party site similar to Pochven entry manual. And essentially what they do is they provide a public bookmark folder that will tell you where the wormholes are. And they provide a paid service that allows you to see statistics on the website and gives you access to a fancy UI to really plan things out. So the way Pochven wormholes work is that they have a guaranteed wormhole connection to known space. All Pochven systems do. The wormhole connections are initiated from known space, high-sec or low-sec, and the wormholes will always spawn in a location relative to where the system used to be located. The same systems that the proximity extraction filament will take you to, actually. Where do you know where the Pochven system used to be located? You can look at the disrupted gates, what systems those are pointing to within Pochven, basically within 3 jumps, or again, just reference the Pochven entry manual. So let's say we want to get into Harva, or we want to know where a Harva wormhole will lead. We can just, again, scroll to the Pochven entry manual and look at these systems. So if you're in Pochven and you want to get out, you can essentially just probe scan your current system and see if there's a wormhole to high-sec or low-sec. If you're looking for entry, you can visit any of the systems listed under that Pochven system, and you're guaranteed to find a wormhole that connects to Pochven. So again, if we want to get into Harva specifically, we can visit Matamal, Patchachara, Marima, etc., etc. We can scan all those. We will find the wormhole into Harva. That said, you're not guaranteed to have the wormhole within Pochven. It is a high-sec or low-sec initiated wormhole connection. If you're in Pochven and you scan for the wormhole, and it's not there, that means it has not been found in high-sec. So you are to exit at that point via a wormhole. What you have to do is you have to get a buddy or an alt, or wait for some random guy to do it, to scan around in these systems listed, and they will eventually find it. Right? That said, there are some particular Pochven wormhole quirks you need to know about. The primary one being that when you warp to a Pochven wormhole, you will land 70 kilometers away from the actual wormhole. When warping to a standard wormhole, you land on top of the wormhole, you can jump instantly. It's easy to work around this. All you do is you warp to the wormhole at range, bookmark the wormhole itself as a temporary bookmark, warp away, warp to your bookmark, you land on top of the wormhole, then you can jump. The other word of caution here, this is where standings kind of come into play, is that all Pochven wormholes have hostile NPCs on the wormhole itself watching it. Wormholes actually spawn the roaming fleets of NPCs that run around the region. So the type of NPC is dependent on the wormhole itself. So in HiSec, any wormhole that connects to Pochven will spawn Triglavians. If you're in Pochven, any wormhole that connects to HiSec will spawn Edencom. If you're friendly with both factions, that doesn't matter. Same thing occurs for JSpace, wormhole space, and nullsec connections. Nullsec wormholes will spawn rogue drones. Again, those always want to kill you. Wormhole connections to wormhole space will spawn sleepers. Again, those always want to kill you. So again, you're going to want to warp to at range, bookmark, warp off, warp to the bookmark to actually jump. As long as you're quick about the warps and you're not hanging out on the wormholes, you'll be safe. All right. Space garbage. Basically, this is how you make your money and what you're doing here. So to find your space garbage, you are looking for NPC wrecks or player wrecks that you can loot or salvage. So all the wrecks will have modules in them, or ammo, or guns, or whatever. Or you can actually salvage them. All of the wrecks within Pochven from Edencom and Triglavians will give you Tech 2 salvage, which is quite valuable. The first location or set of locations where you can find these NPC wrecks is basically where the NPCs roam around and actually shoot each other most often. That is, again, the sun grid. That is the stellar observatories, which is an anomaly at the sun. Those are primarily occupied by Triglavians. However, there will be other NPCs that warp to those. Stargates themselves, and then the player-owned customs offices, all of them have the chance to have NPCs near them. However, in particular, the player-owned customs offices near the gates will have the most activity. What tends to happen is that you'll have, let's say, a set of Edencom NPCs on the gate, and then a set of Triglavian NPCs on the customs office near the gate, and so they will try to shoot each other, and they'll make a giant wreck field somewhere in between. Location 2 is completed observatory flashpoints. This is a high-end combat anomaly that you will see fleets of Vargers and Scorpion Navy issues and Iki Turses completing in Pochven. That said, they're highly lucrative, and the players that complete them generally do not actually care about all the wrecks they leave behind. If you shadow one of these fleets, you can visit the site after the big player fleet completes them, and you can salvage all the wrecks they leave behind. How do you know if a site is completed? The site appears in the agency window as an active OBS location. You can open your agency window, find where the active observatory flashpoints are. That'll lead you to a fleet of players likely running them, or a fleet of players will likely show up soon. They will run the site, aka when they warp to the site, a beacon will spawn on your overview that says it's active. There will also be an anomaly window thing that says observatory flashpoint. When the site's completed, the beacon will still be there for about a minute, and the site will be warpable to and active, but the anomaly window item will disappear. You can descan the site to see if the players are still there or not. And if they have gone, that means it's probably safe to warp there. That said, when you warp to the site initially, you'll land in room 1 with an acceleration gate. There can potentially be hostile NPCs that are active and alive in room 1. Basically, when you arrive, bookmark a wreck in room 1, and then if it's safe, continue to room 2 through the acceleration gate. If the site has been completed very recently, there will be a lock on the acceleration gate for 60 seconds. Simply wait out the lock and then take it. Then you can bookmark a wreck in room 2 and then warp off. Once you warp off, eventually the site will despawn, but the wrecks will remain. And essentially what you can do is you can warp to your bookmarks then, and you'll have 2 safe spots which you can salvage from, which means the only way players can find you is through combat probes or by having that pre-existing bookmark. Be careful warping to these because there may be support ships left behind, or there may be other salvagers here and salvaging the site, and so the site may still be active and it might not actually despawn. The main player fleets that are running these sites are likely to ignore you. However, their support ships may get bored. I'm guilty of this, of just, hey, look, salvager, free kill, right? If you're in an active site, be warned, in room 2 there is the no-no zone. If you stray too far away from the center of the site, approximately 50 kilometers, marked by the giant stellar observatory wreck, you'll get targeted by NPCs that will probably instantly delete you. The final location where you can find wrecks is basically player fights. These big fleets of Scorpion Navy issues and Vargers will fight over these observatory flashpoints, and they'll kill each other. And a lot of the times, yes, they will loot wrecks afterwards. However, they're not going to salvage the wrecks they leave behind, or they may run out of room and therefore leave valuable items. You can find these player fight wreck fields on gates or on obs grids themselves. Just be careful. There are 2 strategies with those, right? You can go after the fight is completed, or you can go during the fight itself. Just be careful going during the fight itself. The 2 fleets probably have bigger things to shoot at that are more important than a lone salvager. However, again, you may end up with a support ship that sees you and goes, oh, easy kill, let me take care of this real quick. So that brings us to the strategies you can use for your space garbage truck when you're out salvaging. First strategy I will call just be as cheap as possible. This is a 70 million to 100 million ISK per hour activity, and if your fit only cost 400,000 ISK, you just don't care if you die. You will make more money than you lose, essentially. You can do this in a Corvette because, again, we have module drops, right? You can also kind of fit your Corvette for a little bit more survivability, fit for a line time so you get around faster, add a micro warp drive, add some salvagers, etc., etc. Option 2 for your space garbage truck in survival is fast align time. Basically, warp away as players land. That we're abusing that negative 30% warp speed that Pochven has, right? That means if you're on a wreck field at a player-owned customs office and some PvP pilot in a frigate comes out of the gate and they see you and they try to warp to a wreck near you to try to kill you, you can warp away faster than they can actually land. Here's an example of a vigil fit that works for this. This is something I've killed out in Pochven, killing salvagers. Basically, the main key points is fit for a line time. If you're under 2 seconds, the way the game server ticks work is that you're uncatchable as long as you as a player are paying attention. Dual prop here for, again, you're managing your speed. If there's a wreck 30 kilometers away, you can get to it very quickly. However, you're managing that align time so you can turn off your micro warp drive or turn on your afterburner as the need applies. You have a little bit of tank with the shield extenders. You may run across NPCs that are active, and this basically allows you to survive a pot shot and not get instantly deleted by some NPC. If you're going to use this fit, feel free to downgrade as needed. And other ships work for this. This is just what I've seen. commonly, Magnate is another popular choice for this strategy, and generally all the other exploration frigates are as well, mainly because they have that 400 meter cube cargo space. They get a lot of room, and they have, the Magnate in particular has a lot of low slots you can fit for a line time. Third strategy is the just leave strategy, I'll dub it, and basically you're looking for warp core stability here. You're fitting a warp core stabilizer, and this kind of does align with that fast align strategy as well. The Venture is just the most extreme version of this strategy because the Venture has that innate +2 warp core stability. Essentially, if you use a warp core stab, you'll need at least 3 points of warp disruption to be pinned down by an aggressor. The Venture is the more extreme version of that because it gets +2 innately, so that's 5 points. Or, no, my bad, 4 points. 5 points total to pin you down. 2 scrams plus a disruptor. That is more than your average ship will have. Basically, the only risk to this strategy is that you do not have enough tank to survive the... You'll get caught initially. You activate the warp core stab. They'll start shooting at you, but you do not warp away before they kill you, even though you can warp. You don't see many Ventures because they have very limited cargo hold, but again, you can kind of merge this with other strategies very easily. Magnate, again, is very popular. They'll fit it for a line time plus a warp core stab, and they kind of blend the strategies together for the fast line and the just leave strategy. Last strategy, which is not very successful, typically is the fighting back strategy. Typically you see destroyers doing this because they have extra high slots for salvagers. If you do not have a salvager fit, again, you can, these wrecks do have modules in them, so you can make money just looting instead of looting and salvaging. This strategy tends to work better with friends as more of a PvP fleet than a salvage fleet, because essentially what you're doing is you're working as bait. An enemy frigate will warp at you or cruiser will warp at you. They think they get an easy kill, but haha, you have guns and warp core scrams and webifiers yourself. You pin them down and then your friends show up and you kill them. You flip the tables on them. That said, you're mainly killing other salvagers with this. This strategy is really good if there are a lot of salvagers running around because you can basically take wreck fields from other people. Destroyers are the most common fit for this. However, you can see this with other ships. Herons, I see a lot doing this because you'll look at them and you'll see a little salvager laser beam going off at a wreck, and then you look closer and then you'll see the rocket launcher and you go, ah, I probably don't need to mess with him. Well, any questions on fits? Yes, this is basically just any Corvette. You get them for free. So you have... Because the wrecks drop modules, you don't even need salvagers fit. These salvagers are just a bonus. So basically, you'll see this in the loot tab at the end of the slides, but if you grab a Meta 4 torpedo launcher off an Edencom wreck, or maybe you find a player wreck and you grab a Republic Fleet large Navy shield extender or something, that's a 30 mil item for the faction module or a 4 mil item for the meta module. You'll instantaneously make money. You can dock with one wreck salvage and make money back, or basically start from scratch every time. It's just that low effort. You're probably going to die in it, but you're not going to care about it, right? And essentially, as long as you get your pot off, you can get another free one of these in any Pochven station. Alright, here are the best ways to kill salvagers, and how to kill your classmates, essentially, if you want to. One of the more effective strategies I've run across is hyperspaceial interceptors. You are kind of flipping the script here on that negative 30% penalty to warp speed by just warping as fast as possible. And what you're doing is essentially vibe checking anybody you come across and trying to catch them not paying attention. Despite having a 2-second align time, if they're afterburning or micro warp driving around, their line time increases, and if they're not paying perfectly attention, you can catch them. The other way you can use this fit is that you can actually pass other people in warp. So let's say you're on a gate and you see a salvager salvaging wrecks on a customs office. You warp to a wreck near the salvager and your interceptor. You land there very quickly. However, the salvager pilot is on their toes and they warp off. But you see where they warp. They warp to another customs office or station or something. You can then warp to that station or to that customs office, pass them in warp. And because of how the warp deceleration works, you'll be able to catch them as they come out of warp. And there's nothing they can do about it. So to not get caught by a hyperspatial interceptor, you need to warp to safe points, pay attention, and have a clean overview. Do not have an overview tab that's just all. Or the better way to do it is to have a split overview. You can actually take your overview tabs and separate them out just by dragging. So you can have a overview tab of player ships, PvP pilots, and wrecks, right? And that'll basically allow you to see things a lot better when someone might be actually coming at you. And the main way that people die to hyperspatial interceptors is being greedy. So they think they can get away with a 2-second line. We bounce around each other. We play that cat and mouse game for 30 seconds or so. And eventually they will warp back to a wreck instead of just docking up and waiting for a minute for the PvP pilot to leave. And they will get caught. You're essentially playing a cat and mouse game of who's paying attention the most and who's on top of things the most. This is a fit I run all the time. This is an example of a crow. This is a full kite fit. It's basically speed and paper tanked. You'll see a lot of dual points on interceptors, on ships, trying to kill salvagers, because this basically defeats that warp core stabilizer. If you're in warp scrambler range, you'll have 3 points of scram total. And the afterburner plus warp scram combo on these fits will allow you to essentially, let's say you run into a bait salvager, they're likely micro warp drive fit. You can, and if they're not micro warp drive fit, you're just faster than them with the afterburner anyway. You can eventually use the scram defensively to be slower to them and escape before you actually die. Of particular note with hyperspatial interceptors, it doesn't have to be an interceptor. There are other ships that get bonuses and will warp around very fast. Just interceptors are the most common version of this that you'll see. Second target profile that you need to be aware of is rocket bombers. Basically, these operate by not actually fitting torpedoes and fitting small guns, ignoring the hull bonuses. Except for the hull bonuses, that is the no targeting delay on decloak. Essentially, a bomber can decloak next to you. You will not know it's there, and pin you down with a warp scrambler and a disruptor instantaneously. A rocket bomber will catch you if it wants to catch you, and there's pretty much nothing you can do about it, which is depressing. But here's the thing with rocket bombers. They are very weak ships. They are very vulnerable, and they are very slow. Generally speaking, if you fight back against a rocket bomber, you'll win. Or if you have an afterburner fit, and the rocket bomber doesn't have a web fit because it's limited on the mid-slot modules it fits, you can escape before it kills you. Typically, the bigger issue you run across with these is if the rocket bomber has friends, you will pretty much die guaranteed. You may be able to fight back against the rocket bomber, but his friend in a standard frigate, you're already caught. You're not escaping, right? Will come and kill you at that point. This is a very common example of a rocket bomber fit. This is a Hound. It's got a little bit of tank on it to survive better. Interesting notes with the rocket bombers is that you have 3 launcher hard points, so you'll commonly see rockets fit. However, they're not limited. They don't get a rocket launcher bonus. So you do see rocket bombers, air quotes, fit with things like autocannons or hybrid turrets. You'll see mixed weapon systems. You'll see 2 turreted weapons and 2 rockets or 2 missile-based weapons. Kite bombers are a thing as well. You can fit them with railguns or light missiles, and basically those are more survivable, but you're relying on warp disruptors, which that means a rocket bomber will then be defeated by a warp core stabilizer. The other note is that you do have enough CPU on a bomber, if you fit it correctly, to fit an expanded probe launcher. This will allow you to scan down salvagers and safe points and whatnot. Again, this is not necessarily for the PvP aspect, like the actual guns on. This is more for that instantaneous point potential, right? The last profile of ships that will kill you as a salvager that you really need to worry about is basically one-tap, I kill you in one-shot ships. The main weapon system that does that is artillery, and there are basically 3 flavors of that. There are Thrashers, Lokis, and Panthers, all Minotaur ships. So a Thrasher is going to kill you with its artillery volley by warping at range. And betting that your overview has tons of stuff on it, and that you're not going to see him warp to you, and that you're going to be really zoomed in on your ship camera-wise. They'll warp to you at like 20 kilometers. If you look at the screenshot of Pyfa, 2,000 damage all at once, and you die. There's nothing you can do about it. Loki operates the same way, essentially. Basically, it'll have a covert ops cloaking device, so it'll warp around, find you, warp to you. It can also use combat probes. It'll decloak at a distance, again, hoping your overview is cluttered and that you're zoomed in. Wait out its cloak targeting delay time for 5 seconds. Shoot you, and try to kill you one shot. A Panther is a Black Ops battleship. It cannot warp cloaked, and it is very expensive. That means that these are very rare to see, and essentially it turns into an ambush predator of sorts. There is no decloak target delay timer, so it is an instantaneously decloak lock fire thing. These will often be fitted with sensor boosters to lock you very quickly. Basically, you have to kind of know the signs to avoid Panthers. Like if you see a wreck field and there's just a bunch of dead salvage wrecks, like you see, oh, there's like 3 magnate wrecks in the salvage field. Maybe I shouldn't go to that one kind of situation, right? You will not see Panthers roaming around Pochven. They're just too expensive, and the region is too dangerous to be flying around solo gate to gate. If you look at this example fit, again, the key points here are lots of volley damage all at once from the guns, good tracking, sensor booster to either increase your targeting range or lock speed, and there is no point because there's nothing to keep you warp off, because the plan is to kill you in one shot before you even get the chance to warp off. The main way to fight against these and to avoid these as a salvager is basically to keep your overview clean and to know the signs. Any questions before we get into the liquidation aspects?
So there's not much so like none of the ships you would bring to salvage can tank the damage from this?
Correct.
Okay.
You'll either, so for example, you may fit, I've seen salvagers with like medium shield extenders fit. In that case, they may be able to tank a shot depending on the range or the tracking of. Artillery is a projectile weapon system. It deals with fall off. Sometimes you get lucky, and you survive. But again, the plan for these to kill you is to basically make sure you're not paying attention, right? And try to catch you and kill you one shot instead of actually unlike the, rocket bomber or hyperspaceial interceptor, there's no fight occurring, right? There's no guns being fired and pinning you down for 30 seconds or a minute. It's just, I'm here, you're dead.
And then also in the overview, see, I have the E-Uni one, I have the miscellaneous tab. That might not have combat ships pop up at the top and you have 5 seconds. What do you do to try to spot them?
So with your overview tab, you can actually split your overview. So you can actually take that miscellaneous tab and drag it out into a so you can have 2 overview windows up, right? So that's one way to combat it. The other way to combat it is to essentially be zoomed out on the camera, right? The wrecks will have the little triangle symbol, and the player ships will have that gray square. So you will see these appear on your screen, right?
Someone asked a good question in chat too, but that's all I have to
I
say.
do not have chat open. Thank you. Space Australia. If you tank one shot, do you have time to run before the second? Typically, yes, actually. Your artillery, the way it works is it's very high damage instantaneously, but a very low cycle time on the guns. So it's one of those things. Large artillery is really bad about it. If you've ever flown something like a Tornado, a Panther is basically 20 seconds between each shot. So you should have time, plenty of time to work away in the case of a Panther. Even with something like a Thrasher, it's still 5 to 10 seconds between shots, again, depending on player skills and all that. So if you tank the shot, you should be able to escape, yes. All right. Let's talk about selling. You've acquired a bunch of junk. What junk can you expect, and what do you do with it? All right, so if you're running around Pochven using filaments and you're not staging because you're salvaging, you're in a bunch of different systems all at once, you probably have a bunch of loot at random stations in whichever, across the entire region, right? If you're in Otella, you're going to drop your loot off in an Otella station. If you're in Navula, you're going to be dropping loot in a Navula station, right? If you have the skills that are appropriate for things like a blockade runner or a deep space transport, you can try to consolidate and extract everything as a batch. However, that might not be the best idea. The other solution is to extract loot from each station individually. The best way, especially considering the filament timers that we talked about for the spool and potentially being combat throwdown, is to find the wormhole connections and then haul out through the wormhole. So there is a Discord user called Railgun in the Luru Discord. Luru's a streamer. He posted a screenshot of his loot from 1 hour of Pochven salvaging. There's a little bit of NPC and a little bit of player wrecks here, so it's a kind of a good spread. Basically, the notes here are, this is on the high end, right? It's 144 million ISK. But the big notes here is that you need to be very mindful of your loot to volume ratio for like value, because this is 144 million total, but if you look at things, there's a Republic Fleet large shield extender. That's probably about 30 mil, and it's only 5 meters cubed. There's a lot of filaments. Filaments are typically highly valued, especially the proximity extraction filaments. Those, a single filament of that is probably going to be 5 to 6 mil, or was. We'll see after how the patch of filament spool timers change things. Torpedo launcher tech tubes, those are pretty valuable, though he's got 5 of those at 5 meters cubed each. Same thing with a warp scrambler. That's about 3 mil for 5 meters cubed. Prototype cloaking device, it looks like a good wrap. That's like a 3 million ISK module. However, it's 100 meters cubed in volume. Not worth the space necessarily. So you could take this 144 million ISK loot tab, that is 2,500 meters cubed roughly, and put it in a Tech 1 hauler and move it through the wormhole. Or you could cherry pick the valuable modules out that are actually worth a good bit for the volume, load them into something more slippery like your salvager fit itself, gate them and consolidate those high value modules into one extraction system that you actually like. Let's say Otella, for example, since it's got good high-sec JITA connections. And then haul just the valuable off. Yeah, sub 2 second Synesis is a great hauler ship. Finger and chat. Fantastic idea. Of particular note, the crystals do not typically, those are a use yourself kind of thing. They're typically damaged and you can't repair those really. So it's not like you can sell those often. Interstellar navlogs, those drop from NPCs. Those are used for the LP store in Pochven. You may actually want to leave those in Pochven and convert them into things like skill books or trig items so that you can sell those. You might not actually want to haul those out. So with that, the basic list of how do I do this is grab a ship with some salvagers, and a Pochven Cry filament of your choosing, Perun, Villez, Archie. Filament into Pochven from HiSec after forming a fleet. Warp around Pochven, changing systems until you find a wreck field. Take your ship, start looting things and dropping loot off in stations at whatever rate you want to. While you're doing that, try not to get killed by any NPCs or players. Do that for however long you want. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Go sell your money. Go sell your loot, make some money, enjoy your profit. And that's all I got. That is the general guide of how to salvage in Pochven. Any questions? Do people hunt haulers commonly? Yes and no. Haulers are not very common in Pochven, kind of like gate camps. You can gate camp in Pochven, however, the way the system's laid out with the D-scan range, it's not very common. Tech-1 haulers are a popular target, especially things like epithals that are going to do planetary industry. However, the region activity is not high enough that you have dedicated fleets roaming around doing that. Well, if someone sees you in a hauler, will they try to catch you? Yes. Are they going to see you in the first place? I would not use a T1 hauler. T1 hauler station to wormhole, you're going to be fine. T1 hauler gate to gate, that's where you're going to run into an issue, right? If you're going wormhole to station or station to wormhole, your exposure risk is so low. Since you land at the station, you dock instantly. You land at the wormhole, jump instantly, right? Your only risk is that you jump into the wormhole and there's someone already there. All right, I think that's it. I don't see any more questions. Pleasure having you all. Thank you for attending.